Hello, horror fanatics. Before we plunge headfirst into the chilling abyss of a dark, spine-tingling tale that might just keep you up tonight, I have a small request. If you're enjoying this descent into dread, if you feel a shiver down your spine, and if you want to be the first to know about other unsettling stories like this, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support means the world and helps me bring more nightmares to life. Now, turn off the lights, mute your notifications, and brace yourselves. Because once you step into the shadows of Blackwood Creek, there's no turning back. The air in Blackwood Creek hung thick with the scent of pine and impending rain, a familiar aroma that usually brought a comforting sense of home. But tonight, in the autumn of 1998, it carried a subtle undercurrent of something else, a metallic tang, like fear. The town, nestled deep within the ancient redwood forests of Northern California, was a postcard come to life. Quaint wooden houses, a single general store, and a church steeple that pierced the canopy of towering trees. Life here moved at a different pace, dictated by the seasons and the gentle rhythm of small-town gossip. Everyone knew everyone, and secrets, if they existed, rarely stayed buried for long. Sarah Miller, 18 and perpetually adorned with an oversized hoodie, hunched over a flickering computer screen in her bedroom. The glow illuminated her wire-rimmed glasses, reflecting the intense focus in her eyes. While her peers were at the Friday night football game, Jake Anderson, her best friend since they were toddlers, probably scoring the winning touchdown, Sarah was dissecting a cold case from Alaska, an unsolved disappearance that had captivated her for weeks. She dreamt of escaping Blackwood Creek, of the bustling anonymity of a big city university where her analytical mind could thrive. But even as she scrolled through blurry forensic photos, a part of her felt the pull of the familiar, the warmth of a town that, for all its quietude, had always felt safe. A sharp knock on her door startled her, making her jump. "Sarah? You in there?" It was Emily Carter's voice, tight with a tremor Sarah had never heard before. Emily, vibrant and artistic, the social butterfly who somehow managed to bridge the gap between Sarah's introversion and Jake's popularity, rarely sounded anything but cheerful. Sarah's stomach churned. She opened the door to find Emily, face pale, eyes wide and bloodshot. Behind her, Emily's usually stoic mother, Mrs. Carter, was openly weeping into a handkerchief. "Lily's gone," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "She's just gone." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Lily, Emily's 7-year-old sister, a whirlwind of ginger hair and infectious giggles, was a familiar sight around town, often seen chasing fireflies in the park or drawing chalk masterpieces on the sidewalk. Gone? How could a child simply disappear in Blackwood Creek? The initial hours were a blur of frantic activity. The town, galvanized by the shock, mobilized. Neighbors fanned out, calling Lily's name, their voices echoing through the darkening woods. Sheriff Brody, a man whose tenure had mostly involved mediating disputes over property lines and chasing errant deer, looked visibly out of his depth. He deployed his deputies, initiated a formal search, and called in state resources, but the sheer vastness of the redwood forest felt insurmountable. Jake found Sarah outside the Carter house, his usual athletic confidence replaced by a grim worry. He put an arm around her, the familiar comfort doing little to ease the knot in her stomach. "They'll find her, Sarah. She probably just wandered off, got scared." But even as he said the words, his eyes scanned the encroaching shadows of the forest, a silent acknowledgement of the terrifying possibilities. Days bled into weeks. The initial optimism waned, replaced by a creeping dread. The search parties dwindled, exhausted and disheartened. The charming small-town facade of Blackwood Creek began to crack, revealing fissures of paranoia and suspicion. Parents kept their children indoors, locked their doors, and eyed their neighbors with a new, unsettling wariness. The local gossip shifted from benign trivialities to hushed whispers about Lily, about what could have happened, about who could be responsible. Then came the first disturbing clue. It was found by a volunteer from the next town over, during a routine sweep of the Silent Hill, a craggy, heavily wooded area known for its treacherous terrain and unsettling quietness. It was a child's worn teddy bear, one Lily had reportedly cherished. It wasn't just found. It was carefully placed at the base of a gnarled, ancient redwood, almost like an offering. The searcher, a grizzled old hunter named Silas, paused. "It's not just a lost toy," he muttered to Sheriff Brody, his voice raspy. "Look closer." The bear's eyes had been meticulously replaced, not with buttons or beads, but with two small, polished animal teeth, milky white and strangely unsettling. They gleamed faintly in the dim forest light, staring out with a cold, vacant intensity. Sheriff Brody, usually unshakable, felt a shiver crawl down his spine. This wasn't an accidental loss. It was a deliberate act. It was a message. The discovery sent a fresh wave of terror through Blackwood Creek. The police now knew they weren't dealing with a lost child, but with something far more sinister. Forensics combed the area, but the forest, as always, gave up nothing. No footprints, no fingerprints, no discarded fibers. Just the bear, a silent, macabre sentinel. A week later, the town was plunged deeper into the abyss. Tommy Jenkins, a 9-year-old boy from the other side of town, disappeared from his bedroom window during the twilight hours. His parents, still reeling from Lily's disappearance, had been extra vigilant, but a back door, usually double-locked, was found ajar. The same chilling pattern emerged. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just a silent, phantom-like disappearance. And, like Lily, a macabre token was left behind. On Tommy's pillow, nestled where his head should have been, lay a toy soldier. Its plastic head had been cleanly removed, replaced by a small, dried bird skull, meticulously glued into place. Its empty eye sockets stared up at the ceiling, a silent, accusing gaze. Blackwood Creek descended into full-blown paranoia. School was suspended indefinitely. Parents boarded up windows, installed new locks, and bought guard dogs. The annual Harvest Festival, a cornerstone of the community, was canceled. Whispers of old town legends resurfaced, tales of the whispering woods, of ancient spirits, or something far more tangible, yet equally terrifying, lurking in the depths. Sarah, Jake, and Emily met in hushed tones, their youthful innocence irrevocably scarred. Emily, in particular, was a shadow of her former self, consumed by grief and a gnawing guilt. Sheriff Brody, his face etched with fatigue and frustration, confessed to his most trusted deputies that this wasn't just a child abductor. "This is something else," he rasped, gesturing at the crime scene photos. "This is cold. This is deliberate. This is collecting." He hated the word, hated the image it conjured. Driven by a growing sense of helplessness and an analytical mind that refused to be silenced, Sarah started her own investigation. She spent hours in the dusty town library, poring over old newspaper archives, local historical accounts, and faded microfiches. She found old articles, dismissed as local curiosities, detailing similar disappearances dating back decades, always involving young children, always during specific times of the year, and always with some bizarre, macabre offering left behind. A child from 1957, another in 1974, one in 1986. Each case was written off as an accident, a runaway, or an isolated incident, never connected, never fully explained. Then, buried deep within a collection of local folklore compiled by a forgotten town historian, Sarah found it. A series of chilling tales about a figure known as the Harvester or the Collector. The legend spoke of a shadowy entity that emerged from the deepest parts of the redwood forest every few decades, preying on the innocent, taking their essence, and leaving behind strange tokens. The descriptions were vague, almost mythical, but the pattern of disappearances and the macabre offerings chilled Sarah to the bone. It wasn't just folklore anymore. It was a terrifying, living truth. The echoes of innocence lost were not just whispers in Blackwood Creek. They were the terrifying footsteps of a recurring nightmare. The discovery of the Harvester legend ignited a dangerous obsession within Sarah. The theoretical true crime podcasts she devoured had armed her with an unsettling ability to connect disparate dots, and Blackwood Creek, her home, was now the center of a real-life horror story. The police, though now taking the disappearances with a grim seriousness, were still chasing shadows, operating within the confines of conventional law enforcement. Sarah knew with a horrifying certainty that this entity, whether man or myth, operated outside those rules. Jake, despite his initial skepticism, found himself drawn into Sarah's frantic research. He saw the fire in her eyes, a dangerous mix of fear and determination, and his loyalty to her, and to Emily, superseded his desire for normalcy. Emily, however, was spiraling. The grief over Lily's disappearance had morphed into a desperate, almost manic, need for answers. She clung to Sarah's research like a lifeline, her artistic sensibilities now translating the macabre details into dark, unsettling sketches that haunted their group discussions. Mark, the cautious one, initially wanted no part of it, but the chilling reality of Blackwood Creek's descent into terror eventually pulled him in. Their first breakthrough came from Sarah's deep dive into the old folklore. The legend wasn't just about disappearances. It spoke of specific locations, old abandoned structures deep within the forbidden Silent Hill, places where the veil between worlds was thin. One such place was the old Blackwood lumber mill, long abandoned after a mysterious fire in the 1960s, a place shrouded in local taboos. Locals avoided it, claiming it was cursed. Armed with flashlights, Mark's old, beat-up pickup truck, and a desperate resolve, the four friends ventured towards the lumber mill one moonless night. The air grew heavy and cold as they approached, the sound of their own footsteps unnervingly loud. The mill stood silhouetted against the night sky, a skeletal structure of rotting wood and rusted machinery, a monument to decay. The stench of damp earth and decay hung heavy. Inside, the mill was a labyrinth of shadows. Dust motes danced in their flashlight beams, revealing ancient machinery covered in spiderwebs and a thick layer of grime. They found nothing at first, just the echoes of a forgotten industry. But then, Emily's artistic eye, finely tuned to patterns and subtle details, noticed something. Etched into the decaying wooden floorboards, beneath a collapsed section of the roof, were faint symbols. Primitive, almost tribal, they resembled stylized animals and intertwined thorny vines. Sarah recognized them from a historical text she'd found, ancient pictograms of the indigenous tribe that had once inhabited this region, symbols associated with rituals of passage and offerings to the forest spirits. As they deciphered more, a chilling narrative unfolded. The symbols, when arranged, spoke of a sacred hunt, a harvest of the pure, and a guardian of the threshold. This wasn't just a serial killer. It was someone or something rooted in a twisted, ancient belief system. As they pieced together the fragments, they discovered a hidden, almost invisible, entrance to a sub-basement, concealed beneath a loose floorboard. The sub-basement was a crawl space, dark and suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something sickly sweet and cloying, like old flowers and dried blood. Their flashlights cut through the oppressive darkness, revealing a scene that turned their stomachs. This wasn't a lair. It was a museum of terror. Arranged meticulously on shelves carved into the earth were dozens of small, wooden effigies, each intricately carved in the likeness of a child. Each effigy had small, disturbing modifications. One wore a necklace of polished animal teeth. Another had tiny bird skulls for eyes, mirroring the tokens left for Lily and Tommy. Below each effigy was a neatly labeled jar containing a faded, childhood possession. A tiny shoe, a lock of hair, a dried flower from a child's dress. This wasn't just a murderer. It was a collector of stolen childhoods, a morbid archivist of lost innocence. On a central pedestal, under a single, flickering lantern, lay a leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with archaic script, a mix of Latin and some unknown dialect, intertwined with disturbing charcoal sketches of children and ritualistic symbols. Sarah, her hands trembling, managed to translate fragments. The journal belonged to a man named Elias Thorne, a recluse who had disappeared from Blackwood Creek in the early 1900s. Thorne, a disgraced anthropologist obsessed with local indigenous folklore, had documented his descent into madness, believing he had found a way to preserve the essence of youth by harvesting it from children at specific celestial alignments. He wrote of a great cycle, of the forest demanding its tribute, and of himself as its chosen guardian. The journal also contained precise celestial charts and detailed maps of the silent hill, marking specific trees, rock formations, and even underground springs. It was a blueprint for the harvester's activities, a chilling testament to his methodical madness. It revealed a pattern. The disappearances always occurred during specific phases of the moon and specific planetary alignments, coinciding with the sacred hunt rituals described in the ancient symbols. Suddenly, a twig snapped outside. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The friends froze, their hearts pounding. The air grew perceptibly colder, and the flickering lantern seemed to dim. A shadow, long and impossibly thin, stretched across the entrance to the sub-basement. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, a whisper of cloth against dry leaves. It was too tall, too gaunt to be human. A low, guttural humming started, a sound that seemed to vibrate from the very earth beneath them, a discordant lullaby. It was coming from the shadows, closer now. Sarah gripped Jake's arm, her mind racing. This wasn't just Elias Thorne's journal. It was active. The harvester was still here, still operating, still collecting. And they had stumbled into his labyrinth. The air was heavy with an ancient, predatory presence. They were not alone, and they were very much in danger. Mark, surprisingly, was the first to act. His eyes, usually filled with skepticism, now held a terrified clarity. "We need to go. Now." He grabbed the journal, stuffing it into his backpack, and motioned towards a rickety ladder leading to a forgotten exit tunnel. The humming intensified, growing into a low, mournful chant, as if the very forest were singing a dirge. As they scrambled up the ladder, a chilling whisper seemed to slither through the air, directly into Sarah's mind. "Welcome, little lambs. The harvest is plentiful." The voice was ancient, cold, and promised an unspeakable terror. They had found the collector's lair, but now they were trapped in his game. The escape from the lumber mill was a blur of adrenaline and raw terror. They burst out of the forgotten tunnel, gasping for air, their hearts hammering against their ribs. The chanting had followed them, a disembodied echo that seemed to emanate from the very trees. They ran without looking back, driven by the chilling whisper that still vibrated in Sarah's mind. They didn't stop until Mark's pickup was speeding down the winding road, leaving the silent hill behind like a bad dream. Back in the relative safety of Sarah's living room, illuminated by the harsh glow of the kitchen light, they laid out their findings. The journal, Elias Thorne's insane testament, became their terrifying Rosetta Stone. As Sarah, fueled by coffee and a desperate urgency, translated more of the archaic script, a clearer, more horrifying picture emerged. Thorne, a man obsessed with extending life and overcoming mortality, had twisted ancient indigenous beliefs. He believed that by ritually harvesting the essence of pure, innocent children at specific celestial alignments, he could achieve a form of immortality, a perpetual youth for himself, or for something he served. The journal revealed that Thorne hadn't merely disappeared. He had undergone a grotesque transformation. He described a parasitic symbiosis, emerging with an ancient malevolent spirit of the forest, the root-bound guardian, an entity that had whispered promises of eternal life in exchange for its own sustenance, the life force of the young. Thorne had become the harvester, no longer just a man, but a vessel, an extension of the forest's dark will. His physical form was decaying, sustained by the harvests, a grotesque mockery of immortality. The celestial charts in the journal indicated that the next harvest night was rapidly approaching the night of the autumnal equinox, coinciding with a rare planetary alignment, and the target, chillingly, was hinted at in the final, most disturbing entries. A child connected to the previous harvest, a bloodline that had resisted the ritual. The fragmented clues pointed to Emily's family. Lily wasn't just a random victim. She was part of a twisted lineage, a predestined sacrifice in Thorne's insane cycle. This revelation shattered Emily. The grief she'd carried for Lily morphed into a burning rage, a desperate need for revenge and justice. "We have to stop him," she choked out, her voice raw, "before he takes anyone else." They knew taking their findings to Sheriff Brody would be met with skepticism, if not outright dismissal. A century-old journal detailing a monstrous forest spirit and a madman's quest for immortality wouldn't hold up in a court of law, or even convince a pragmatic small-town sheriff. They were on their own. Their plan was desperate, reckless, and born of sheer terror. They would confront the harvester. Using the maps in the journal, they identified the sacred clearing, the presumed site of the ritual, deep within the most impenetrable part of Silent Hill. It was a place marked by a cluster of impossibly ancient redwood trees, forming a natural amphitheater, where Thorne had written of the veil thinning. The night of the equinox arrived, cloaked in an ominous mist that rolled in from the coast, shrouding Blackwood Creek in an eerie silence. Armed with camping lanterns, a few stolen hunting knives, courtesy of Jake's father, and a sickening sense of dread, they embarked on their final, terrifying journey. The forest, usually a comforting presence, felt predatory. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, seemed to whisper the harvester's name. As they neared the sacred clearing, the air grew thick with an almost palpable malevolence. The mist swirled, parting to reveal the ancient redwood circle. In the center, a crude stone altar stood, adorned with strange, withered flora and scattered bones. A chilling hum, far more intense than at the mill, vibrated through the ground, a low, pulsating thrum that seemed to echo in their very bones. And then they saw him, Elias Thorne. He was no longer recognizably human. His body was a twisted mockery of flesh and wood, his skin like bark, ancient roots protruding from his limbs. His eyes glowed with an unholy, emerald light, and his mouth, a gaping maw filled with elongated, sharpened teeth, stretched into a grotesque parody of a smile. He was impossibly tall, gaunt, draped in robes woven from dried leaves and sinews. He held a small, struggling child in his withered hands, not Emily's sister, but a new victim, a boy from a neighboring town, lost during a nature walk that day, whose family wouldn't even know he was missing yet. The sight ignited a furious scream from Emily. "Monster!" The harvester turned, his head swiveling with an unnatural jerk, his gaze fixed on them, cold and ancient. "Ah, the defiant ones!" His voice rasped, a dry, whispering sound like leaves skittering across pavement. "The broken bloodline returns, and you bring more offerings." Chaos erupted. Jake, fueled by a primal need to protect, lunged forward with his knife. The harvester moved with impossible speed, a blur of motion. He swatted Jake aside like a ragdoll, sending him sprawling against an ancient tree trunk. Mark, his face pale, tried to create a diversion, throwing his lantern, but it merely shattered against a tree, scattering harmless sparks. Sarah, her mind racing, remembered Thorne's journal entries about disrupting the cycle. She saw a cluster of strange, phosphorescent mushrooms growing at the base of the altar. Thorne had written of them as essence anchors, plants that absorbed the residual energy of the rituals. If the source of his power, the ritual itself, was tied to the physical world, then it could be disrupted. While Emily, screaming Lily's name, engaged the harvester in a desperate, futile struggle, trying to free the boy, Sarah grabbed a large, jagged rock. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she slammed it repeatedly into the base of the altar, aiming for the glowing mushrooms. The stone cracked, splintered, and the mushrooms began to glow brighter, then shrivel. As she struck the altar, the forest around them seemed to shriek. The ancient trees groaned, their branches twisting violently. The harvester recoiled, his emerald eyes widening in a mixture of pain and fury. The ritual was being disrupted. His power was being severed. He turned on Sarah, his bark-like hand reaching for her, fingers ending in razor-sharp claws. Just as he lunged, Jake, recovered from the blow, tackled him from behind, driving his stolen knife deep into the exposed, root-like flesh of Thorne's back. The harvester let out an unearthly scream, a sound that tore through the air, chilling them to the bone. The entity began to unravel. The bark-like skin cracked, green tendrils of light erupted from the wounds, and his body started to crumble, turning into dust and dried leaves. The ancient spirit, detached from its host, writhed in the air, a formless green mist, before being sucked back into the very earth, vanishing beneath the roots of the redwood trees. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by their ragged breathing and Emily's sobs of relief as she cradled the terrified child. The sacred clearing, once a sight of unimaginable horror, now felt merely ancient and desolate. The harvester was gone. For now. As dawn broke, casting long, pale shadows through the redwoods, they led the traumatized boy out of the forest, guiding him towards the distant lights of Blackwood Creek. They knew the town would never fully understand what they had faced, what truly lurked beneath its peaceful veneer. They also knew that the legend of the harvester, though defeated for now, might not be truly vanquished. The forest was old, and its secrets ran deep. The whispers of Blackwood Creek had been silenced, but for Sarah, Jake, Emily, and Mark, the echoes of the unhallowed harvest would forever haunt their dreams, a chilling reminder that some horrors, once awakened, never truly die. They carried the scars of that night, but also a fierce, unbreakable bond, forged in the crucible of their shared nightmare. They were the ones who had faced the true terror of Blackwood Creek, and survived. But the question remained, for how long?